Hello there. Welcome back. I don't really know where to start. It's just also intertwined. It's hard keeping your hopes up when you realize you're just in the same position whatever you do. Whatever I do, the brain just works itself backwards again. Keeps justifying itself. To be clear, since I've been at this for some time, some of the delusions are pretty easy to just disprove outright or to just dismiss. Some not so much. Some linger. Tear you apart. Whatever I do, I find myself back at square one. Why would it? I mean, that's borderline dangerous. It basically gives the incentive of whatever you do, you'll always come back to square one. Whatever you do. But that's certainly not true. So why does my brain do this? Why does why is everything so counterintuitive? Which brings us on to chasing tails. Running in a circle. Chasing tails. Whenever we seem to chase something, we only acquire the opposite, is what I've learned so far. Whenever we chase fame, nutrition, friendship, whenever we actively focus on chasing something, we tend to achieve the complete opposite. It does kind of make sense though. Because when a measurement or a rule or a set value becomes a goal, it ceases to be meaningful. In the same way that tests don't really test students for their knowledgeability, tests only test for themselves. When a point becomes a goal, and there are like tests to like reach that goal, you're not trying to satisfy the goal. You're trying to satisfy the tests to get you to that goal. And that's where we apparently fall short. For me, chasing friendship has only left me with basically nothing. I spend majority of every day completely alone. Every day. Weekdays, weekends, alone. Every day. My only company is myself. My only friend is myself. And I have nothing. Nothing. So that was my parents. I mean, I say I'm unknown. I say I have nothing. But I do have my parents. Yeah, but those are my parents. And they, to be honest, happen to be pretty outdated. And not really pleasant people to be around in the long term. I mean, they're completely friendly and there's all that, but it's just, I don't know, I just get bugged by them. Maybe that's just a evolutionary thing or something. I just get ticked off by them quite a bit. So in short, I'd rather not spend time with them. In fact, I actually want to move out. Might even improve my mental condition, but I doubt it. I think I've hit another point of, like, these goes in cycles. You go from feeling neutral to feeling hopeless to eventually feeling enlightened and then back to normal again. For me at least. I'm currently in the phase of feeling very hopeless, very doomed, very destroyed. Fragile. On the brink. Borderline insane. I don't even know what to say, but I know I should say something. But to be honest, I'm pretty out of words. Pretty sick of this fucking shit. I'm sick of returning to square one, whatever I do. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I thought I had a pretty safe, planned way out. It's not like a plan of where to go, it's a plan of methods. So far, again, back to square one. Every single time. Back to being an emotional wreck. to being useless. To self-victimization. There are other people in this world with bigger problems. I just sit here and victimize myself. That's probably the saddest part. Hopeless. Hopeless. I just find it hard to see the worth in it anymore. And that's something I didn't think I would say. I mean, sure, there's always worth to life, but look at the state of the world we've been given. Look at how it was abused, misused. And then you have all the older people of the so-called boomer mentality of my parents are. So that's fun. It's just so disingenuous. Oh, you're not trying hard enough. Oh, well, you're just slacking off. Well, it's easy. I had it easy. Yeah. You had it easy. You squandered it. What a fucking shit show. What a fucking joke. Now, I'm not gonna go and get angry here. But I'm gonna say this. If the boomer people had any sort of foresight, it was used for their own gains. That foresight was not used to ensure a proper future for their kids. Even though a lot of them say they would kill for their kids. They die for their kids. At the same time, oblivious to the fact that they are killing their own kids. Shit like that. And then the fact, like, it's hard to not be condescending to the boomers. I will grant them that most were in bliss because of ignorance. Now, were they truly in ignorance? Or were they fed false information? I can't tell. But both happened. Humanity has known of the coming climate crisis since the 70s. Perhaps earlier. Now, I say that we've known about it since the 70s. Yeah, the governments knew about it in the 70s. And to be honest, I have no actual knowledge of this, but from the stories I've heard. It seems governments can't really be trusted. That's the world we've been given. They expect us to be grateful for this pile of crap. Are you serious? Are you actually serious? I don't know what they are. I'd probably end up ripping my hair out before I found out why they have the mentality they do. So yeah. It's all just hopeless. World politics, world governments, humanity in general is just fucked. The previous generations expect us to be grateful. What for? To live in this mess? I'd rather fucking be dead. Will this time of history be remembered in history books in the future as a special kind of political war era? I have no idea. Perhaps. Are we in a time of extremely fast change? Yes. But then again, we've always been. Go back 500 years. It's basically nothing. Go back 300 years. Well, at least you have wagons and perhaps the first electric car. Go back, okay, maybe not the car at that time, but like literally only 500 years ago there was borderline nothing. And only a half a century later we have custom plastics and polymers and materials and shit. We have always been fast. And that wages my question, which is, are we fastly gonna change for the better, or are we fastly gonna burn this piece of moist grain of sand to a crisp? I mean, people say that extinction events can start to happen as early as 2040, something like that. I believe them. I mean, given what, like, just given what governments lie about, it's probably a lot we don't know of. That brings us to media. Am I for or against media? I have no clue, to be honest. It's a double-edged sword, just like everything else, so it's just a matter of using it correctly. But as we've seen, humanity has a habit of adaptively use tools for non-original intents. That's a very nice way of saying bending the rules. was I? Oh yeah, media. Where do we even start with media? It's basically the same as like, I mean, as I see it, and this is just as I see it, like the media and the government maybe, perhaps, work closely together at times. But what I'm more concerned about is the media working closely together with companies and other industries, because those are private interests, and private interests are not really governed by a strict rule book. Well, they are, but the government isn't really there at every company to check if they have that rule book and if they're following it or whatever. So I'm just saying companies are much more likely to be disingenuine. And the media has not rejected that, sadly. It's picked that up and starting to milk it. Well, it started a long time ago, probably. But it's led to this media industry where it's not news that you have on the news. It's actualities. It's events. It's things that should really be left where they were found. Whilst leaving out the things that should be brought to global attention, such as the Amazon wildfires and whatnot. And other possibly like further doomsday events and crap like that. It's just so sad that everything is essentially driven by money. And when things are driven by money, they are driven without soul. They're driven with the pure intent of money. And money doesn't have soul. Money doesn't have remorse. Money doesn't have forgiveness. That has led to companies and the media, and partially the government as well, to become hostile, heartless entities. Because they are heartless entities, because they deal in money. And that's just like one of the qualms with this new world we've been given, and that we should be grateful for, which I find, if not disturbing or insulting, I would find it hilarious, but I can't even that. It angers me how people cannot see that stepping on landmines will not be good for your lower anatomy. Like, it's fairly clear that it's not. But for some reason, you have this one dude who keeps running into minefields, and that one dude happens to be companies and media and partially the government. It doesn't make sense. And at that point, when the media, when the government, when companies have ran out on that landmine, and when they're, well, eventually have no lower anatomy left, why should we help them? Why should we even express, what's the word? Why should we even express gratitude by reviving these completely broken systems, these completely maligned rules? Speaking of rules, laws. Oh, laws. Oh, laws. Laws. If someone explained laws like they actually are, they sound insane. So let's do that. Laws are rules decided by people who are elected. Seems fine so far. Yes. The elected may spend money to raise awareness that they are, well, the electees, I guess, may use money to raise awareness of their participation. Seems fair so far. Oh wait, I kinda mixed that up. Yes, for some reason I swayed over into going election. Yeah, let's restart. Laws. Laws are rules decided by elected people. Yes, the elected people are chosen by, generally, a board. This board can be anywhere between 153 people, I think it's in Sweden. And in America, I think it's 270 something. Anyway, oh, speaking of, in America, it's an even number. Which kinda makes you scratch your head a bit. Anyway, this board, or the elected officials, are usually... Wait, I kinda lost my thread. Laws are written by elected officials. Elected officials are chosen... Wait, are they chosen by board or by people directly? I forgot. Well, I thought this was gonna be easy, but laws aren't easy apparently. But there was one point I wanted to make about laws, and that is money and laws. And to be clear, I have no formal education on this. It is only crap I've heard around the internet. It is crap I've heard from a load of places over the internet, all saying pretty much the same thing, which is that the elected people who write the laws can somehow be basically bought You can buy one or more votes, essentially, on to pass laws. Now, why would you, as an elected official, accept that you're getting bought, essentially? Because it might come out that you're, well, especially into this day and age, it's basically going to come out that you were bought and that you accepted yourself to be bought, which is not a really good view to have on you, let's say. Well, the people, the companies, the whatever that gives these electees, these elected people, the money to vote in a specific way, might offer a position at the company after their terms end, which is a hell of an incentive. It's a guaranteed job. And like that, what I explained there, I don't know where that happened. I don't know the specifics of anything. But if I'd guess, probably happens somewhere over in the Americas. But then again, this shit probably happens over here too, in Sweden, in Europe, in wherever. There's loads of shady shit the government and companies do behind closed doors. And it's so fucking disgusting that they say we should be grateful for the world they gave us. It's just so disingenuous. It's so... such a lie. It's just sad that they believe it. That they really think they did well. That they gave us a perfect world. And that's just one of the many reasons why I feel not living would almost be better. Fuck this world. Fuck the older generations and the way they behave. No human fucking deserves to live after that. In a way. But not every way, of course. It's all a grayscale. It's all a grayscale. Should we make the most of it? Definitely. We should definitely try to save what we have. But when do we know it's too late? When do we stop resuscitation? When do we clear the earth warm and dead instead of just dead? When do we truly give up hope? Well, that's a question that can only be answered by saying now, but it can only be answered in the future. We'll know when the time comes, hopefully. What will we do? Who knows? Where will we flee? Who knows? Will we all perish? Perhaps. It's a possibility. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of interesting being born in this day and age. It kind of feels like I'm watching the end of humanity happen right in front of me. It feels like I'm watching the end of the great human race. Makes me think of the restaurant at the end of the universe. Only that you can't go back after the end. There's no reset. There's just oblivion. There's just yeah. As the memes say, born too late to explore the earth, born too early to explore the stars. Born just in time to browse about dank memes about humans' impending doom. Ooh. Well, if anything, I'll be the first one to die. Because no one cares about me. No one would alert me if there was a giant tsunami or something. No one would. Like, the only reason if I would survive would be if, like, my wit would be able to keep me alive, but I doubt that too. Because we all make mistakes. Even masters. Even gods. At the same time, it feels so pointless to complain. Worthless to even bring it up. To bring my feelings up, that is. Because it's all just melancholy. It's all the same. It's not happy, it's not sad, it's not anything, it's just indescribable being. So in that way, it doesn't not really of much interest to even tell you, whoever's listening, about all this crap. It's so worthless. But it's even more worthless to communicate that it's worthless. Feels so worthless doing these vlogs. Feels useless. I am useless. I mean, what you're seeing me do now, just sitting here, it's basically what I do every day. I just sit here, being useless. Slowly dying, I guess. This is what I do. I sit And I think and that's what I do. Day in, day out, every day. Having nothing, no one but myself and my thoughts. Alone, forgotten, ignored. Makes me wonder, will I ever run out of things to think about? Probably not with my delusional brain. Played by the ongoing world, played by our self-created impending doom, well, previous generations' self-made doom. Just the world in general. It's The world is currently a disingenuous, money-hungry, soulless thing. That's what the world currently is. Stupid. Like, I can replace a single word of that, and it'd actually be truthful and sound a bit more stupid. The world is a fiat currency hungry, greedy thing. If you know what fiat currency is, you'll know that it's a currency not backed by a physical standard or equivalent. Like, it used to be like for every dollar there was some piece of gold, but that's not the case anymore. So dollars is a fiat currency, and pretty much every other currency in the world is also a fiat currency. And if you heard about some historical context about fiat currencies, you will know that every single known instance of them has died. So it seems stupid of the world to be hungry for fiat currency at its own expense, while the fiat currency earned is just not going to have a value in a few hundred years. And maybe even a month, who knows, because, well, fiat currencies are unstable. That's why the market keeps moving. That's why the dollar is never the same. It would be if there was a piece of gold backing every dollar, but there isn't, because it's a fiat currency today. Oh, let's not get started on the stock market. That's just it's just so sad that the top 5, 3, 1%, whatever, has adopted a literally cancerous lifestyle impacting everyone else. I mean, yes, they're always going to have their own little game in their little circles just because they are the 1% and whatever. The lifestyles just aren't sustainable. Oh, I'll just buy a private jet or something. Or, oh, let me just buy this hotel. Like, sure, you can do that. And you might be the person who also writes some relevant laws or have major, like, power impact in some industry somewhere. But that doesn't mean everyone lives like you. That doesn't mean everyone has the ability to just buy a hotel or a private jet. I think that's where the disconnect is in all of this, is that the people making the decisions have such a different lifestyle to the working force and to the people who hold them up, basically, that it's gonna backfire sooner or later. But yeah, that's just some of my thoughts on the politics today, I guess. And I'm not even gonna mention the green-orange thing. Green-orange? No, what the hell? Why did I say green-orange? Oh well. I didn't mean to butcher it, but I'm not even gonna mention the orange in a suit. I'm not even gonna mention the cucumber in a suit. I'm not even gonna mention Winnie the Pooh on a pedestal. Because do we really need to? If this Earth doesn't change some patterns right now or in the near future, humanity will no longer exist. That's all I say. And that is on the top percentages of people. For their lifestyles and for being uncareful with their influence and their power. But in a way, it's also kind of a way on the rest of the people to shove them out the door too, so we're all kind of responsible. Here's the thing, like, I don't like to get political, and I speak very carefully around politics. Because it's just so dumb. It's so dumb. But it's the least terrible system we have, so. I mean, it would be great if we all could just do whatever we wanted to do. Have some basic checks for maybe like heavy physical machinery. Basically have checks for if you're in risk of damaging someone else unintentionally or yourself unintentionally. Then there should be checks for that, of course. So there should be checks for driving a car, there should be checks for driving an airplane, there should be flying an airplane, there should be checks for having a gun and all that stuff. But generally, people should just be free to do what they want to do without any, like, ideologies, like, bearing down on them. Like, people should be free to express themselves how they want it without being ridiculed and all that, free speech and all that. Essentially, the utopia, if it existed, and there's doubt if it can exist, but for me, the utopia, if it even can exist, which I doubt, is basically a system where there are laws, there is regulation to keep people safe from accidents and incidental things like that. But not like the nanny state kind of accidents, like where, oh, you have to have an education to screw in 2 screws in a plastic thing. Like, it's all a great scale. But the utopia would be that there are laws that say you have some specific human rights, and that's basically it. It will basically say you have a right to be heard, you have a right to express yourself, you have a right to do whatever you want as long as you're not directly or indirectly hurting. Well, let me revise that. You are free to do whatever you want as long as you're not directly hurting yourself or anyone else. And then there's probably some more you could add onto there just to fill out the corners or the edge cases. But here's the thing. The very observation that we have edge cases points to that the system we chose, aka rules, might not be the best for the situation. Basically, if you keep having to adjust the system to not fuck you over, so that it eventually does the only thing that doesn't fuck you over, sure, you might say that that system is looking for not fucking you over, but in reality, without you knowing it, the system is looking to fuck you over. But it can't because you blocked off all those paths with other laws and stuff like that. So that's an argument why laws really shouldn't be, which is, I guess, a case for anarchism. But yeah. It's on a grayscale. That's what I've learned so far. Like, a dictatorship would be very... On the grayscale, it would be very authoritarian, let's say. It would be very safe, perhaps, because it's very restricted. But it isn't really free. You're not really free to do what you want. You are bound by rules. On the other hand, in an anarchist world, or country, or whatever, I mean, it's really in the name, anarchy, right? If there's no real, like, governmental body or rules that can help you, you're off to your own, and that basically means everything is good game, which means you're basically allowed to kill, which is like, yeah, no. So that's the counter argument. That's again, everything is a grayscale. That's what I've learned so far. And so far, the world has decided that democracy, which is, I guess, is somewhere in the middle of the spectrum between anarchism and dictatorships, is the least worst decision, which I guess I can agree on. But to be real though, like, I would really like to see something better. Because, I mean, just look at the world. A lot of countries have democracy. Not all, but quite a lot. And despite of that, look at what mess we are in. Look at how unable we are to cooperate. Look how hostile we are against each other. Why? Like, we are the same species. We're all humans. Anyway, to sum up, I have no solution. I have no real... Yeah, I have no real solution or anything like that. But I am probably a lot more could basically say, yeah, if something better comes around, we'll take that. Now, what would that be? Good question. I guess an AI, because that would truly be all-encompassing and not focusing on money unless programmed to do so, which I mean, you can definitely train a governing AI to focus on money. That would be pretty evident pretty fast, because then it would be just like the previous human counterparts, which would be biased to money. So it's all in the training of the thing, really. And that's like one potential way to have something better than, or marginally better at least, than democracy. But again, there are many problems to solve with AI safety and all of that. But yeah, we haven't tried, so we don't know. But if there's one thing humanity is good at, it's trying things, illogical as they may seem. I mean, that's why we had cesium on Earth. Probably. Was it a good idea? Oh well, we tried. Hopefully that won't bite us in the ass when it comes to the climate stuff. Because just trying stuff got us here. If we're really, 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 really lucky, just trying stuff will get us out of here as well. Maybe. I mean, some of the most revolutionary inventions have been by accident, so who knows? If anything, more people are focusing on it, which is great. But yeah. That's today's DVLog, I guess. But I added the political rant. Why not? Well, it's a contributing factor to my conditions, so I guess it's kind of valid to have it there, but But yeah. World is a mess. My life is a mess. And I'm kinda hopeless, given all of the above. So yeah. I have nothing more to say. like concrete materials, so I will just sign off here and I'll see you some other time.